What's up, guys? So, today we're going to talk a little bit about the aftermath of the race on Sunday. So, I want to get to another Scott Miller bullshit uh, press conference, I guess you could call it. Scott Miller is basically NASCAR's version of the White House press secretary, right? It doesn't matter who's in office, it doesn't matter who's in power, which party, any of that, none of that matters. It's all the same, right? Including the White House press secretary, these people are interchangeable. Doesn't matter who's there. That job isn't really to inform the public or to give the media uh, honest answers about anything. The job of the White House press secretary is to lie, basically to spin a narrative. So it doesn't matter who's there, it doesn't matter what questions are asked, they're always going to steer to a particular narrative. They're not there to be honest. They are there as professional liars. That's the job. So Scott Miller is NASCAR's version of the White House press secretary. He's a PR guy for NASCAR. No matter what his official title is, whenever you see him after a race and people are asking him questions, it's never a good thing. It's always because there is controversy. And he's there to try to mop up and try to tell you that what you see with your own eyes isn't really the truth. Now, I did a video way back during after the All Star race, and um, it's amazing because also Texas Motor Speedway, but that race ended with a lot of controversy. You had caution that was called that shouldn't have been called. It's like it's weird. The NASCAR officials are still. There were even in this race, there were a couple of cautions that didn't need to be called. The people that had a tire issue got off the track, and it wasn't always necessary to call a caution. So sometimes they call it, sometimes they don't. It's still very all over the place. But we're gonna listen to Scott Miller do his PR spin and try to bullshit people about the race and all the controversy that happened. So let's listen in and see what he has to say.
Obviously, we saw a lot of tire problems, and we saw a lot of teams that didn't have tire problems. And we're working working through that. Goodyear's working through that with the teams, and working through what the setups were, what the air pressures were, to try to get to the bottom of it. But there was a lot of teams that reported no problems to us post race, and and they did admit to being a little bit on the conservative side, air pressure, and being closer to the suggested minimums that Goodyear recommended.
Okay, so that's the first thing. The biggest thing in the whole race was the ongoing issues with the tires. I'm going to cut Scott Miller a little bit of slack, right? In all honesty, I don't think we all have all the information. I don't know if we know enough to blame everything on Goodyear. Certainly, there is room for criticism. Um, if I was, obviously expect Goodyear to look deeper into this and to see if there's anything they can do to alleviate this issue. But I do want people to think about something. Before you disagree with me, just listen to what I have to say. Let it marinate a little bit. And then if you're gonna disagree, that's fine. Let me know why you disagree. But I'm not taking a side on either side of the fence. Um, I don't. I'm not really sure that I can blame Goodyear for all of these tire issues, and I'll explain why. If you notice, A lot of these tire issues are popping up very recently. Now, yes, throughout the year, there were issues with, tires here and there. But we did manage to get through the majority of this year, and it hasn't been that big of an issue. This issue has become dramatically worse since the playoffs started. That's not a coincidence. So that's one thing to think about. Also, as Scott Miller just pointed out, okay, and yes, he's doing his bullshit PR and trying to just, you know, do that PR spin that I talked about. But he does have a point, and I don't think it's fair to dismiss him immediately because I already thought this before he ever said this. A lot of teams are not having this issue, and I do think a lot of these issues are related to the teams and the setups, and they're really pushing the envelope. It's not a coincidence that during the playoffs you're seeing this issue ramp up, and it's not just look at Kyle Busch, right? He had two engine failures. I mean, I one of the times the engine it was so catastrophic that oil was coming out of the pipes. So I don't remember the last time I've seen something like that. Um, Engine failures are very, very rare these days. Years ago it was more common. So to see that not just one time but two times during the playoffs, uh, that's not a coincidence. Also, it's Gibbs Racing. They already got busted cheating this year. So are they really shy about pushing the envelope? I don't think so. So a lot of these teams are pushing things to the limit, to the edge, and some of them are going beyond the edge. So you look at the engine failures on Kyle Busch, you look at these tire failures that are happening all of a sudden more frequently, right? It has to, in my opinion, I think it makes sense. It is these a lot of these teams are pushing things to where they should. This tire has a shorter sidewall than the old 15-inch tire, which has a taller sidewall. So what that means is these tires are a little bit stiffer, the sidewall. They're shorter, they're a little harder, so they're more sensitive to air pressure change. So if you run low air pressures, that sidewall is flexing and it's much shorter and stiffer. And if you make that flex, the heat is going to be a lot more uh, of a problem than with the old 15-inch tire, which was more springy. It had a little more give to it. So I do think that these teams are still trying to figure that out. And now that they're pushing this thing to the edge, you're starting to see these blowouts because they're happening very suddenly. A lot of times with the old 15-inch tire, these guys could kind of get a quick warning before the tire would let go. These tires, it just seems like it just happens in the blink of an eye and they don't have time to react. So you look at that, and also look at teams like RFK with Keselowski and Roush. That team has not done anything all year. The only time that I remember that they were competitive was at that race at Sonoma where um, Buscher finished second. They had a very dominant car that day. But outside of that, RFK has sucked for most of the year. They just haven't been competitive. But if you look at the past couple of weeks, all of a sudden, they're very fast. Okay? Kind of the same thing with Stuart Haas, right? Another Ford team. Uh, they've been very mediocre most of the year, and then Kevin Harvick had that quick little run that got him in the playoffs. But Again, tire failures with them. There are a handful of teams specifically that are having these problems. And it's not a coincidence that suddenly RFK is running in the top five and they're very competitive. And you have to, it only makes sense that it's the setups. They're getting way more aggressive with these setups and it shows on the track. It's not normal for any team to go from mediocre to racing up front and competing for wins overnight. That's not common. And it seems to me that they are pushing the envelope when it comes to things like camber, air pressures. Okay? You can make these cars a lot faster if you are aggressive in those areas. So I see specific groups of drivers that are having these problems, specific teams. It's not happening with everybody. A lot of drivers yesterday got through the whole day and never had tire issues. And like Scott Miller said, yeah, a lot of teams were reporting no issues. So I remember years ago, some of you I'm sure will remember when Juan Pablo Montoya was racing for Ganassi and there was a race at Indy, the Brickyard, the oval, and they could not get through 10 laps. I'm talking about the entire field. There were people blowing out tires just after 10 laps. The tires were just shredding apart. That is very indicative of a Goodyear problem. I'm not telling you that Goodyear doesn't have room to improve or things that they need to look at. That's not what I'm saying. But I think people are very too quick to blame Goodyear. And I don't think it's 100% fair. They do deserve a little bit of criticism, but a lot of what we're seeing, these are recent issues. Okay? These are very recent issues, and you're seeing certain teams push the envelope, which happens during the playoffs. And a lot of these other teams, once they don't make the playoffs, they also like to experiment. They're trying to prepare for next year. So they're not really racing for anything other than wins, right? But a lot of them are switching to to the experiment stage of the season. So you look at team, all of a sudden, Brad Keselowski's way more competitive when he's been mediocre all year. That is not a coincidence. And I do think that these tire issues are related to these teams and their setups. So you got to take all these things into account. A lot of these issues also, this is a new car. I think people keep forgetting that. This is just the first year of this car. They are going to discover things, and as time goes on, they're going to have to address those issues. So NASCAR definitely needs, first and foremost, to address the safety issue. Okay? These cars, they really need to take a deeper look in how to make these cars safer. These drivers are all complaining that the impacts are much harsher on them on their body physically than with the old car. That's not good. That's a problem. So NASCAR needs to look at that. There are other small issues that have popped up as well. These fires that sometimes happen on the passenger side. So I don't know if it's 100% accurate to just blame everything on Goodyear or even NASCAR. NASCAR, I do believe, okay, I have a lot to criticize them about, but I don't think that it's fair to say they don't care at all and that they're not focused on trying to improve things, right? I don't think that's fair. So I can't agree with people that are just 100% lock, stock, and barrel blaming everything on Goodyear and NASCAR. These teams they are pushing the envelope. So there isn't a lot of room for improvement with the car. Also, steering box issues have popped up lately. Again, we got through most of the year pretty okay. Even the loose wheel issue kind of, I'm not going to say it ever fully went away, but I do think teams got a little bit more conservative in the pit stops and when you rush things, you make more mistakes. And I just think they figured out, look, dial it back just a notch. We can't keep having these loose wheel issues. And of course, with the penalty being so severe, that has forced these teams to, okay, look, we can't afford to be taking these chances and taking these hits. Let's make sure we get cleaner pit stops and making sure everything is safer, and then let's just get through the race. Okay? So I think that when you take the whole season into account, that's the way I measure things. A lot of people are only fixated on the last couple of races, and that is not indicative of the whole season. Okay? So I'm not going to talk about Texas Motor Speedway. Everybody knows this track sucks. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I just hope that they follow through. They said they were going to eradicate this track and just reconfigure it. I'm not sure what they have planned. As long as they don't turn it into another Atlanta super speedway bullshit track, I almost don't care what they do with it as long as they get rid of this. So we all agree this shit sucks. I'm not going to talk about the race itself and how awful it might have been or whatever. Um, that's not what's important right now. But the tire issues, that's what I think. I do think that just blaming everything and expecting Goodyear to just wave a magic wand and give you a magic tire where you can run these extreme cambers setups and low pressure air. I think it's a lot to expect, especially with the shorter sidewall. You're putting a lot of pressure on these tires, and I do think people are pushing the envelope. And a lot of teams got through the race yesterday with no tire issues. So I that's how I feel about it. So let's move on to the next big controversy, and let's hear what the minister of propaganda has to say about the William Byron punting Denny Hamlin under caution. I'll tell you my thoughts on it after we hear him out.
So I'll have to be honest with you, Bob. When we were in the tower, we were paying more attention to the actual cause of the caution up there and dispatching our equipment. The William Byron, Denny Hamlin thing, we had no eyes on. We saw Denny go through the grass, and by the time we got to a replay that showed the incident well enough to do anything to it, we'd gone back to green. But I'm not sure that that issue is completely resolved as of yet. So we'll be looking at that when we get back to work.
So that's bullshit. That is straight up propaganda. That's him being White House press secretary. He's full of shit. There's no way you could tell me that they couldn't see a replay of, hold on a second, a replay of what William Byron did to Hamlin. You guys know I am not a Denny Hamlin fan. I don't like him, but I have to defend him. I don't care what happened before that. And this is where I think fans have their fanboy hats on way too tight. They're judging this based on whether they're fans of Byron or Hamlin. That has nothing to do with it. I don't care what happened before that. If there's an on-track incident and these guys, there's only two things you can do. During the race, if you have an opportunity to pay someone back, fine. That's always been a part of NASCAR. I'm not going to say anything against that. But under caution, you don't do that. So I don't care what anyone says. What Byron did was inexcusable. All right. And I don't know how you can punt somebody into the grass and then you send the guy that got punted to the back, and the guy who actually did that, who caused that, he gets to keep his spot. In what universe does that make sense? Of course, NASCAR is just a never-ending mismanagement shit show. And you get people like Scott Miller here spinning this,
Sure.
just spinning this as best as he can. Oh, we were paying attention to something else. And come on. This happened at the front of the pack, by the way. So that was fucked up. And for them to force Hamlin, first of all, he should have got his spot back because he was forced into the grass. And Byron doing that on purpose, he should have been sent to the back at the very least. NASCAR is a circus right now, and they're allowing certain things, other things they're clamping down. They don't know what they're doing, and nobody knows what the rules are anymore because it changes, and they do things on a whim. Sometimes a caution is called when there's no need for it. Other times, when they should call a caution, they don't. It's just so all over the place. NASCAR this offseason needs to sit down. They need to go over their rules package, and they really need to clamp down with their officiating and bring consistency. Because at the end of the day, you have to treat this like a sport if you want people to respect it as a sport. How can they when what you're doing is closer to WWE shit? You might as well have Vince McMahon out here answering questions and just making calls on a whim. Nobody buys this bullshit. There's no and the race is over. So the decision for them to do things the way they did it had a profound effect on the playoffs, on points. Hamlin should have kept his spot, and if anything, Byron should have been sent to the back for doing that. These guys are out of control, especially this new core group of drivers that have come along in recent years. They're immature. They have no respect for other people. They are whiny brats. And when they get upset behind the wheel, they don't know how to conduct themselves like professionals. And the other thing I was going to say earlier was, you know, these guys, they're all pussies. They don't want to fight. They don't want to handle things man to man. Right? If somebody wronged you, I would meet this guy after the race, man to man, and we would settle it one way or another. But the reason these kids, I call them kids, they're young men, but they're kids in the world of NASCAR. They're still young. They still have this iRacing mentality where there's no real danger and you act like you're in a video game. You do things during the race that you really wouldn't see as often in years past. I'm not going to say never, but there's no more racing etiquette. There's no more give and take. There's no more, let me just dial it down just a notch and just wait for my moment. Everybody is pushing it 3 wide, dive bombing. And when somebody's in the way, they just punt people out of the way. Uh, there's no patience. There's no listen, I know it's harder to pass nowadays. There's nonstop talk of dirty air. I got to be honest, man. I'm getting a little sick and tired of hearing about people complaining about dirty air. Dirty air is going to be around forever. Are there things they might be able to do technically to try to, reduce that? I'm sure there is, and I hope they do. But dirty air is part of racing, and you have to deal with that. So the passing might be a bit harder, especially at specific tracks. But guess what? We've seen guys uh, wait and just plot their move, and it's not easy. But that's another thing that I'm sick and tired of. There's too many fans that are complaining. It's like you want the passing to be super easy. Um, it's I don't know, man. It's gone way overboard in my opinion. So this is these a lot of these kids now. They need they need a beating is what they need. I'm not one to advocate for violence, but man, these guys, they talk shit, they make threats, and they never do anything. And if they do something, it's always behind the wheel of a car. Now, Denny Hamlin is a big shit talker. Remember last year, and I made a video about it, and I told you back then he has no balls. Denny Hamlin has no balls. He talks shit. He's all bark, no bite. Chase Briscoe took him out at the Indy Road Course last year. Remember that? I did a video on it when at the end of the race he cut through the track and then he ends up punting Hamlin, who had the lead and was gonna win that race. So not only did he knock Hamlin out, but he took a win, a surefire win away from him. And what was Hamlin's reaction? He didn't even seem that upset. He confronted Briscoe after the race. They had a few words. Nothing ever came of it. And I told you guys back then, he has no balls. He's all talk. He's all bark, no bite. And till this day, he has never, ever paid Chase Briscoe back. Earlier this year, he had several incidents with Ross Chastain. Again, talked a lot of shit, went on social media, made a big show. All bark, no bite. Until this day, he is yet to pay back Ross Chastain. Now, there is a case to be made that he's in the playoffs. You can't just go out there and do something stupid. I get it. But do you really think he's going to pay him back? I mean, he has had several opportunities to just move him for a position. And if I was him, I would wait for a better moment. So I will admit that. But I'm just waiting for a moment where he actually follows through on a threat. Now he's threatening, William Byron. Does anybody really believe he's going to do something? He might punt him, next week. I don't fucking know. Because I think it's getting to the point where people are starting to say, this guy has no balls. I've been calling it out since last year. I told you guys, these guys, they make threats, but they never actually do anything. Even phony tough guys like Kevin Harvick, another big shit talker. He's been a shit talker his whole career. Acts tough. When have you ever seen him actually get into a fist fight? These guys talk. They might try to grab each other, and then the teams get in and split them apart. I would love to see for these guys to just make some space for them and let these guys go at it. But these guys don't want to fight. So, to me, until you punch one of these guys in the face and you really let them know, I'm not going to take your shit, it's not going to stop. Why do you think none of these guys are afraid of Denny Hamlin? None of them. They don't respect him. And why should they respect him? They've seen that he's all bark, no bite. So that's how I feel about it. Now, these guys, I do think they're all out of control. They drive over their heads, and they do a lot of things that I just think it's been getting out of control. And a lot of these veterans are not doing anything. They're not teaching these guys the ropes. So that's why you don't see the same racing etiquette that we used to see years ago. So I'm going to show you one more thing just to here is, hold on a second. All right, let me go, bear with me. I'm going to show you the new Golden Boy and what's going on. I'm going to show you real quick. Ty Gibbs hits Ty Dillon on pit road. This is something else that happened during the race. Watch this. It's very quick. Let me slow this down. So I'm going to show you what the new Golden Boy has been doing. So we're going to show you really slow. This is down pit road. Up here you could see Ty Dillon and Gibbs getting into each other. Now, here goes Gibbs retaliating. Hits him, and you could see over here there's somebody standing there. This is a safety issue. Again, NASCAR does nothing. There he goes. Watch this. These are the games these guys are playing because to them, this is no different than iRacing. They treat this like a video game, and there are real people in danger here. NASCAR, I mean, they might do something at some point this week. I don't know, but this is one of the new Golden Boys, right? He's not the only one, but he's Joe Gibbs' grandson, right? Very talented driver, but another guy that needs to get punched in the face. But see, these guys don't want to fight. It's easy to do this inside the car, inside the safety of the car. This is, I don't know. It's just I'm a little bit old school maybe, but NASCAR again needs to do something about this. This is I don't know what else to say. Those are my thoughts. I look forward to your comments later.